to hear in this very moment the reparations discourse in this very moment that's characterized by precarity for not just Black Americans, not just Hispanic Americans, but also white Americans, is kind of tone deaf. Mm-hmm. And I could take the kind of out. How do I say to somebody who actually has lost, how do I say to a white person who's lost his or her job, right, and doesn't have health insurance and is fretting every day that he or she may, contract this potentially deadly coronavirus? How do I say to them, from my position as a Black tenured professor, you really are benefiting from that white privilege?
So you're saying, how do I, as a rich Negro, look on a poor white person and look down on them? You don't, you fucker, because you come from a higher class position. I don't understand what you're talking about. That's like Jeff Bezos looking at me and talking shit. Or fucking, I don't know, some rich fucking person who's not Jeff Bezos looking at me and talking. What are you talking about? This is why I hate you. Y'all are dumb. And white people, whoever watched Jacobin, quit giving these motherfuckers money. Anybody else?
No, I mean, he brought up a point about like academics, and it's just so fundamentally wrong. Like, what do I do as an academic? Well, no, as an academic, you probably should educate poor white people about how they uphold white supremacy, because a lot of them don't know how or why they do it. Like sometimes you need a good academic to sit down and explain some shit. And it seems like he's using his degree and his credentials to refute these things, but he asks himself, what can I do as an academic? And he's coddling the white feelings. So, well, as an academic, you could maybe write a fucking book, write something nice, like, explain it to the poor white. So he keeps asking himself the questions that he hasn't answered, and he keeps, and there's like several questions that he said, what can I do? What can we do? And like, if he's an academic, and that's like, and it's too bad that academics do get maligned, and we've done it a little bit here. And it just happens, like academics get stereotyped and maligned as these tone policing leftists. And it's unfortunately, he's playing into it, but it's like academics should have a role in like really explaining how this system is, how these books are, how all this unpacking all this whiteness stuff. And, he said, what should I do to that poor white? That's a great question, Mr. Reed. You probably shouldn't do apologetics for, reparations. So it's confusing, like that point, what should I do? I mean, he's an academic. I mean, I think that's a great privilege to use, in this context. I think CRT comes from academia. This critical race theory comes from academics, so it's like he asks his own questions and then he refutes his own questions at the same time,
My thing is, if you're not able to have this discussion and educate poor whites, then why the fuck are you an academic? He should ask himself that internal question. Why am I an academic?
Is
to be an
butter
academic
biscuit Reed
or not?
Sorry.
To be or not to be? Like that's what you should be asking yourself, homie.
Butter biscuits or cheddar butter biscuits?
And this issue of academics kind of jumping fields is really big too, isn't it? Like the linguist will start talking about this and that, or the social soul. It's like,
or let's talk about his daddy.
I don't know what his background is.
Adolph Reed, his daddy talks about economics when his daddy's a political science major.
Yeah, you got to be careful with that sometimes, right? Yeah, because academics are comfy, right? They have time to do stuff like this. It's like that John McWhorter guy and Glenn Lowry. Those guys, they're more on the Black conservative side. I mean, he's a linguist. Like he teaches linguistics and he's really good at that, but then he'll just like offer his own thoughts on the side about what's going on in the world. Then as an academic, his own thoughts just kind of become content. So a lot of these academics, I don't know if they realize that he's mouthing off on a podcast, but with headphones and a microphone, but it's actually going out to a lot of people. And he has a privileged position, obviously, amongst your community as well. So maybe academics are very powerful, even though we make fun of them and stuff like that. And
yeah, and I am an academic, so yeah, I completely get that. I went to school for theater and dance, philosophy, and French. And I'm using that to do environmental justice work and environmental racism, and to like eradicate environmental racism and to get into science. So what a lot of academics do, what I've seen, which is why I get a lot of pushback from some academics, is a lot of people are doing they're jumping fields, but they're not merging what they know with the field that they're jumping into. And none of these people are willing to go and do internal work, which is why they push back at me often in these academic groups. They're like, what are you saying? I never thought about that before. And it's like, then what are you doing? But
but they're not used to talking to like real Negroes either.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like a lot of white people aren't used to like talking to Negroes who aren't a buffer class. And I told that person straight to their face, I was like, listen, we Magneto. Like, you know, we over here like burning shit down. We feel a certain kind of way. Like I say all the time, Tim Black is Professor X and Reset Race is Magneto.
He and his growing legion of followers attacked power plants, factories, government buildings, determined to disrupt human society.
Like, you need the two to balance each other out, but...
Now, as far as what Reed is talking about, look, he's making a thing about, like, okay, the dynamics are weird because I am of an upper class. How does it look for me to tell a poor white person that just lost their job, it doesn't have health insurance, that Black people deserve reparations? Well, he personalized it and said, I deserve reparations. And it's like, first of all, you got to change the framing of all of this. If you're going to have that discussion, you need to like kind of go through the history and explain, like, we're not talking about cashing checks because people are struggling and they're poor. We're talking about this being a situation of people being enslaved, people being like for generations being just disenfranchised from participating in American society. Have that conversation. And then what you need to do is be like, well, why don't you help us get what we deserve, and then we can help you get what you deserve. That's the way you build that coalition and have that conversation.
You really are benefiting from that white privilege, right? I mean, and where's my check, right? Because you're the privileged one, not me, right? And look, privilege comes in many forms, and that, of course, is baked into the privilege discourse. But at this point, it seems that the only privilege that we are committed to is racial privilege, right? And maybe gender-based privilege, without appreciating the fact that there is this thing called class privilege out there. And that while working one's way up, if you're a Black person, irrespective of sex, or a woman, irrespective of race, as you move up the income ladder, you gain privilege. That doesn't mean that you don't experience racism or sexism. Of course you will, right? I mean, that is what it is in this moment. But how you experience racism or sexism plays really differently depending on where you are often enough in the queue. It may not prevent you from being profiled by the police if you're a Black person, right? If you're a Black person who is in a predominantly white neighborhood or whatever, and the police decide that you don't belong there because you're a Black person in a predominantly white neighborhood, they may not notice that you're nicely dressed and that you've got this fancy car that doesn't have the spinning rims and the light package, but you have the respectable version of this luxury SUV or a sports sedan or whatever, and the racist cop might not notice it. But when you look at the inmate population, it's pretty clear what role class plays in how we experience the criminal justice system, right? Because most of the inmate population across racial lines is comprised of poor people, right? Poor and working class people. There are very few college graduates in prison. They're there, but there are very few of them. And there are a variety of reasons for that. But one of them is, beyond the fact that middle class and certainly upper class people are a lot less likely to perpetrate violent crimes and property theft, right? Because those correlate. That happens. Obviously, I watch Discovery ID, so I know that violent crimes transcend class, but but in the aggregate, the mass wave of violent crimes is comprised disproportionately by young men who are poor, right? And the like.
Yeah, I hope he reads Chrissy Teigen's Twitter DM from 2005 and follows the instructions. What y'all got? Because I can't live my life like this. Oh my God. Oh my God, he's worse. No, he's not worse than his daddy, but he's terrible. So Black people shouldn't get reparations because there's a few of you academic, and I said not Negroes, not Negroes. Like Kyle says, there's a difference between you. We do not have, I'm going to insert the video. Y'all going to hate me because I'm going to keep playing these goddamn charts. I'm going to insert the video later because we all got to go to sleep tonight. At every level, white people have more money than Black people, even rich Negroes. So, yes, Oprah, Tyler Perry, Byron Allen deserve their reparations check. Sorry, you stole the money. You owe it to us. It doesn't matter that these Negroes were able to escape hatch out of Blackness and break the class fucking barrier, even for fucking white people. That does not make it where the most of the Black people that don't even have money in a bank account are okay. You cannot compare yourself to poor Blacks. This is a lie. And again, this motherfucker never used a chart or any numbers. I'm done. Just look at the numbers. The numbers don't lie. I would read them all off, but my throat is killing me. So let me show you the charts that I made from this so you can really see this in real numbers. So this is the bottom percentile, 1, 2, and 3, white and Black, right? Because this is a Black and white country. Latinos, sorry, y'all literally got here 5 minutes ago, and y'all shouldn't have the same wealth that we had building this country. Because again, I showed y'all this other chart that showed that you people just got here. And when I say you people, I mean people of color and white people. Because most white people, y'all got here after 1865 too. So a lot of y'all are fucking newcomers to me. So let's talk about debt, right? White people in the first, these are your Appalachian trailer park whites. They're negative 11,760. Black people are negative 25,622. So you see, looking at this chart, that we have less money. It's obvious. Now we get into the second percentile. The second quintile. This is quintile, so there's only 5. So 2. White people are at 51,118. Black are at 2,394. So you're saying there's this great wealth disparity all across the board, and we got to fix white people. But white people in the second percentile, which is still poor white trash, let's keep it a buck, have over $48,000 more than Black people. Let's get into the third percentile. This is supposed to be middle class, right? This middle class whites, they got almost $172,000. If you consider this middle class for the same quintile, Black people have $20,000 at the same quintile. This is why I hate Matt Brunig, because he tries to play us like there isn't a wealth and Sagar too, because Sagar tries to play us like there is a wealth disparity at every single level between Blacks and whites. Yes, white people have wealth redistribution issues that need to be fixed, but you motherfuckers have class. Black people don't even have class like this. And you Fred Hampton leftists aren't even smart enough to understand or know. And this is why you need to go out and research, and you need to talk to people. And you need to talk to economists, because that's how you know what's going on. You're only as smart as the questions that you ask. And you guys aren't smart enough because you're not asking the right questions. You can be smarter. I'm not calling you dumb. I'm just saying you need to do better. So let's get into the fourth quintile. I'm gonna restart sharing my screen. So this is the fourth, not percentile, this is the fourth quintile, because there's only 5. So white people have 434,817. So 435,000 versus less than 80,000. These people don't live in the same neighborhood. But again, the Fred Hampton leftists are talking about how we need to close how we need to fix class first amongst white people, or else white people will come and kill us. So white people have more money than us, and they're going to come and kill us for us getting money that still won't equate to what they get. Let's get into the top one that Matt Brunet likes to talk about, how there's only, no, it's Saga that likes to talk about how there's only a real difference between the top or the bottom. But I already showed you all the places where there was a difference. So here's the fifth quintile. I'm going to pull this up. Oh, cool. It's already up. So this is the fifth quintile. You look. In the fifth quintile, the average white family has over $4 million. The average Black family has 618,000. These people don't live nowhere near each other. Fred Hampton leftists, you're talking about wealth inequality, but you don't understand that white wealth inequality and Black wealth inequality is a vast wealth gap at every level. And even if you fix white people and readjust their wealth levels, Black people, you still have to fix us. Reparations.
So, like, he started off this whole thing basically trying to make it seem like it's unfair for Black people to ask for reparations or demand reparations because of his own personal status. And he tried to turn it into a class thing where he went on to just basically describe the plight of Black Americans who don't have money. You know what would solve all of these problems with the legal system and all this shit he described is if we get that $800,000, $900,000 check where we can get lawyers and we don't have to be involved in violent crimes. We don't have to be like doing all this, like any crime that involves like trying to get money. It's insane the mental gymnastics that went on throughout this whole video. But I'm glad that it's over and I don't have to listen to this motherfucker talk anymore.
So it's always great to be a part. But I have to say, listening to this was very heated. This was a whole exercise in why I really have gotten really jaded with like Western English fucking liberal philosophy, especially the English language, because basically what we've been refuting most of today is like just English language games of logic, like games of Western Enlightenment value. Really, it was all English. And I always think like, man, if we were speaking a different language, like, is this just English language games? It's just everything we were talking about today was just a lot of this kind of whiteness stuff. So it's just fascinating how much space that can take up 4 hours to just unpack actually no substance. So, but I have to say the substance of reparations is there. Thank you for doing what you're doing. It's great. I'm at the 16 quadrillion number. See Thomas Craemer's study. It's free.
We love Thomas Craemer over here.
That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Thomas Craemer. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Public Policy at the University of Connecticut. And my research is in implicit and explicit racial attitudes and how they influence people's opinions on race-related topics, among them affirmative action or government aid to minorities, but also reparations. And I focused recently on reparations research.
That's fantastic. And I'd like to begin with just kind of when you talk about reparations, what are you talking about specifically?
Well, basically, my analysis has so far been limited to U.S. slavery reparations. And I should mention that my interest in reparations stems from my experience of growing up in Germany and having to deal with the history of Holocaust and meeting a Holocaust survivor who actually received reparations from West Germany and befriending him and learning more about what it meant. So yeah, when I became a citizen in the United States, I was interested in race-related questions and also in the question of reparations. And in the United States, of course, this refers to reparations for African Americans. And that can be for slavery, unpaid wages and lost inheritances, or it could be for discrimination after slavery ended, the Jim Crow period, but also racial discrimination during the New Deal era and up to the present day. Which all have wealth implications for African Americans living today, meaning they inherit less than they would have otherwise had these injustices not happened. So I focused on a very narrow slice of that, just slavery, not colonial slavery, only slavery during the United States. And I did not look at discrimination after slavery. And I should mention that's not because those other injustices aren't important, quite to the contrary, they're very important. And they deserve reparations as well. I just wanted to focus on a time period where there's a lot of historical documentation and where it's fairly easy to come up with rough back of the envelope estimate. And that's what I did in 2015 with this paper. And basically the idea was to estimate the population of enslaved men, women, and children in each year between 1776 and 1860. I'm omitting the Civil War years because it's very difficult to come to reliable estimates of the enslaved population during the Civil War. That makes my estimate very conservative, of course. And also the fact that I'm ignoring anything before 1776 also makes the estimate very conservative. So what I did is I estimated, based on census records, the population in each year, the enslaved population that was available, and multiplied that with the number of hours that were available to slave owners during that time. And that is 365 times 24 hours a day, because the slaves had no control over any hour of their day. Even rest was prescribed by the slave owner according to the slave owner's best interest, not the self-interest of the enslaved. And what I then did is I multiplied these numbers of hours per year with very low hourly wages, namely unskilled labor during that time. And it's really amazing. I mean, in 1790, I believe the hourly wage for unskilled labor was 2 cents per hour. By 1860, it had risen astronomically to 8 cents per hour. So very, very conservative. Many of the enslaved were skilled, actually. So taking unskilled wages is a conservative assumption. And then the puny amounts are actually quite astonishing. And just multiplying them with the number of hours available, I came up with an estimate in 2009 dollars of $14.5 trillion. That was roughly 1 year's worth of the US GDP at the time. In the meantime, if I compound it further up to today, it's between 18 and 20 trillion dollars in current currency. Each year it increases, so there is an incentive built in. The sooner we pay off reparations, the better for both sides. But that's usually not considered. There is somehow this idea that inheritances dissolve over time, but they don't. They actually accumulate in more and more hands usually, and they earn interest, and the inheritance itself grows. And it currently earns interest in the hands of those whose ancestors did not do the hard work, whereas those individuals whose ancestors did do the hard work are excluded from those benefits. And that is a present day injustice that in my mind requires a form of reparation.
Yeah, and that brings up, you have several examples of times when the United States has played a role in paying the slave owners for loss of property. And the two that you mentioned are the Haiti independence and the France, I don't know how you say the spoliations.
The spoliations claims.
Yeah, thank you. My mind would say exploitation, like exploitation, but yeah.
Yeah, spoliation.
You can talk a little bit about those two.
Yeah, the spoliations claims are an obscure legal thing. It's just, there's often this argument that we can't trace property rights over many generations and who is and is not entitled to inheritances that come from an injustice that's long ago. So basically the argument is let bygones be bygones. But there is an example in the United States of those spoliations claims, which are very obscure. They come basically from the fact that France helped the United States win the Revolutionary War. And in return, the United States declared they would help France should it ever face any challenges to its colonies in the Caribbean. That happened when the Haitian Revolution broke out. France asked for military aid from the United States, and the United States said, no, thank you. So basically what the French started doing was it captured American ships and took the cargo. And that was called the spoliations. And the ship owners, of course, demanded reparations from France for that lost property. And all this happened in the 1790s. So it's long ago. Yeah, eventually the United States concluded a contract with France, a contract of friendship that absolved France from having to pay reparations to the ship owners, and it absolved the United States from having to help militarily based on that contract with the king. So all seemed well, except the ship owner said, well, American government, you can't do that. Fifth Amendment, you cannot take our property for public use without just compensation. And so they fought, their heirs fought for compensation. And the main debate around that happened during the Civil War. So that was in the 1860s, when actually the historical injustice had happened in the 1790s. And eventually those claims were paid out, I think, in the 1910s. So in 1913 or something, those spoliations were still being paid out. So in the 20th century, so that's a long time ago. And there was this argument that actually older claims are more important than younger claims. And despite the fact that the United States was going through a civil war, it had to honor those old claims. And there's some very lofty rhetoric around that. They are passed down in families from generation to generation. We have to honor them in order to our word to be credible. I'm paraphrasing here very poorly, but so that is a legal example of multi-generational reparations that were actually paid out.
Listening to Reset Race, you now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race, you're now tuned in to Reset Race. What? Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You're tuned in to Reset Race. You'll find out who really about justice and really who fake. On the edge, go back to U.S. Southern plantations. Penniers, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration. Redlining lynchings, we are old from this nation. You're not about justice if you ain't for reparations. MG the wise one, cousin mother intellectual. Samantha bringing fire, anti-black, we pressing you. No permanent friends and no permanent enemies. The backbone of the country, to win, you need our energy. You gon' see. Listening to Reset Race. You now tuned in to Reset Race. You're listening to Reset Race. You're now tuned in to Reset Race. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Put them back on the grill again. We grilling them. Back on the grill again. We grilling them. You're listening to Reset Race. ADOS need reparations to make America great. You're tuned in to Reset Race. We no longer starving while others eat off our plate. No. You're listening to Reset Race. We focused on our justice claim. We know what is at stake. You tuned in to Reset Race, you'll find out who really about justice and really who fake.
Until you do right by me, everything you think about is gonna crumble.